So if all the artists and scientists who are on our call, our panelists, can hear me and they want to turn their videos back on, anyone who's rejoining the call, um, folks have been asking about the view. If you're only seeing me, that means that you have set your screen to speaker view. If you go to the top right corner and hover over that button, you can change it to gallery view, which hopefully you'll be able to see everyone on the call.
I'm delighted to welcome you.
So we'll just wait a few moments. I think that there maybe have been a moment lag for some folks, but we will get started shortly with our Q&A. And while I just have everybody on the call, I wanted to thank a few folks. First of all, a huge shout out to our curator, Julie Komnick, and to Jane Marks, and to Nick Geib, our filmmaker. These three were truly instrumental in making this documentary happen. And so we really want to thank you. I'd love to also thank the Parched Steering Committee, who worked for many, many months to help put the exhibition together. Those folks being Dawn Bills, Julie Komnick, Ron Doba, Peter Federici, Allison Gitlin, Audrey Cruz, and Jane Marks. We'd of course like to thank the Flagstaff Arts Council Board, our Executive Director, Jonathan Stone, and the rest of the staff for supporting and believing in these kinds of projects. And thank you to our major sponsors, the National Endowment for the Arts, Arizona Humanities, ECOS NAU, the National Science Foundation, the City of Flagstaff BBB Fund, and Coconino County. So while we are still waiting for a few more folks to get back to the Q&A session, and we will start asking questions, I just wanted to give a little bit of an overview on where we're at with the in-person exhibition. The Center for the Arts, unfortunately, is currently closed due to Coconino County's COVID guidelines. So we're no longer taking in-person reservations for the show. However, the show is scheduled to travel to the Amarin Museum in Dragoon, Arizona, which will open in February 2021. So anyone who is really interested in seeing this work in person, the Amarin Museum is committed to opening the show safely. And that will happen in February 2021. Following that, the show is going to again travel to Natural History Institute in Prescott, Arizona, and that's going to be in 2022. So I believe if folks have questions, please feel free to just drop them right into the chat box. You can ask a question to any of these scientists, artists, or filmmakers here. So we will just open the floor. And this is the first time that the artists and everyone involved in the film was able to see the screening. So if you guys have any questions for each other, feel free. Okay, so the first question I'm getting is, how did you come up with the idea of doing a documentary about this? I'm gonna send this question over to Jane Marks to answer. Jane, did you hear the question? You're on mute.
I'm unmuted, right? So we decided to do the documentary when we were all down and out about COVID, shutting everything down. So we didn't know, at that point it was in the spring, summer, where things were starting to rage again in Arizona. So we were just unsure if the exhibit was gonna be able to open up live. And we had planned a series of panels throughout the fall to talk about the different issues. We had, all sorts of programming, and we realized that none of it would really work that well virtually, because the whole point was to get people to integrate the science and the art. And so if we just did panels, people wouldn't necessarily see the artwork. And so we had the idea just to, after a year of planning, to just, give up on all but one panel and then switch to the documentary. because it gave an opportunity to hear the science and the art. And then as a scientist, I really like it because it's really cool for me to hear artists interpret their own work. And so it added a dimension that we might not have had if we had gone our original route. So it ended up being a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Jane. And I'm just going to make a note to everyone who's just getting back to this Zoom call. There was some confusion about how to view. If you go to the top right corner, you should be able to see gallery view, where you can see everybody on the call rather than just speaker view. So we have another question that's come in, and it's, how much collaboration was involved during the process of developing your pieces? Did you see that other works develop, spark ideas for your own pieces, or did you go into the process already knowing how you wanted your piece to turn out? Julie, who would you like to answer this question?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And that's a great question. So I'll start with a little summary, and then I'll choose a couple artists who whose works was really collaborative in nature. But you know, one of the great things about this Zoom call right now is none of the artists has been together since we were on the boot camp back in January 2019 with COVID. During the installation, we just had one artist a day, so it's really great to see everyone virtually. Thanks for being here. Yeah, but the idea was during that initial boot camp, the artists were together to share a common experience and then make artworks based on that experience or life experience that preceded it in many of the cases. But from that boot camp, several of the artists joined with each other either to share ideas or actually make collaborative projects. So I think Delisa and Sean would be clear people to talk about, but also Kathleen and Ernest, I think, would be fascinating to hear from, since you're all in the same virtual space. So maybe Sarah, you can facilitate that a little bit.
Yeah, let's jump over to Sean first, if you wanted to talk about how you convinced Delisa to partner up with you.
Unmute.
Now can you hear me?
Yeah.
I guess I get tired of doing art by myself, and it's more of a challenge to do it with someone else now in my career. So during boot camp, I approached Lisa and asked her, or told her I had this idea and about using cattail down to symbolize snow, and if she would like to perform inside it somehow, then to start thinking about it. And that's how the collaboration started.
Delisa, did you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, Sean floated this idea across, and I'm always game for working with a new kind of material, and a whole vat, a whole circle of cattail down being underneath it, I thought sounded like an amazing idea. And little did I know that when you get lots and lots of cattail down on top of you, it does weigh something, and it does actually take the air away. So that was interesting at a certain point to learn that.
Yes, I remember when we installed that piece. Kathleen, do you want to speak, and then Ernest, about your collaboration?
Sure. When I heard Ernest speak at boot camp, first of all, I was amazed at how horrific it was that there was not clean water on the reservations. And I think at some level I probably knew this, but hearing Ernest talk about it with such passion, I just really wondered, what does that water look like? And so I reached out to Ernest, and he was just most generous with time to meet with me on the reservation and share with me a lot of his knowledge and a lot of the ways that water is viewed, and it was amazing. So I was really grateful that Ernest was so generous and so willing to speak with me and to work with me and help me collect water to create the photograms. So thanks, Ernest.
Ernest, did you want to share at all your experience working with Kathleen? We might have lost Ernest for a moment. Are you there? There
You
he
see
is.
me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted and the video was stopped. So yeah, it was a pleasure working with Kathleen. And first of all, thanks to Clee for inviting me up there to be a part of that boot camp session you had in Tuba. So that's where basically me and Kathleen started talking, and we got connected through Clee emails and stuff, and she asked if I could assist her with getting water samples from the Hopi Reservation, like springs and wells and homes. At that time, I was just now starting to work on our filter project that we're doing out here that I called No Arsenic for Hopi. Our mission is to get water filter systems for the homes. Right now, we're working with reverse osmosis systems. We also have 2-unit systems and single unit systems. What we're going to do is take water samples from the area and match the correct filter systems to that area. But yeah, it was fun working with Kathleen and getting the water samples, and I was really amazed with her work with the photograms and how she does that in the process.
I'm just going to jump in, Sarah, really quick. Ernest, if you'd like to throw or put the link to your organization in the chat, I think people would be really interested in following up with that. And I'm really personally fascinated by the collaborations. And another collaboration that came out of this was Neil's project working with Roger Clark. If you would like to just touch on that briefly, that'd be great. Thanks, Neil.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thanks, Julie. A big part of it was that I had this sense of the different costs of water, and finding a way to visualize that might be powerful. So I'm referring to the flood lines piece, which was depicted really beautifully in the documentary, by the way. Thank you so much. It was really exciting to see. But getting access to those numbers, and it depends on what number you're looking for, is not as straightforward as it sounds. And especially in the case of like, Roger's going to be far more knowledgeable on this, but especially in the case of like groundwater extraction, like it's so hard to know, like how much, because of the, the monitoring and regulatory environment in Arizona. So Roger was a huge source for information for where I could find that data to realize that project at all. And one thing that I'll mention, just because I'm in the thick of it, is Sarah mentioned earlier that this show is moving to the Amrand and then again to Prescott, and my intention is to make the floodlines piece relevant to each of those regions. So the data will change, hopefully, to kind of better represent the populations down there. But anyway, it was a pleasure, and Roger was a big help for that piece in particular.
So thanks, Neil. It's an honor to be working with this group of artists and to see the documentary, which I've seen the exhibit, where we didn't have the performance art, we didn't have any of the depths that the documentary does. So just congratulations to everyone, and it's just been my honor, and I'm happy to throw something in there. If I may, I'll share the deepest knowledge of water came to me long after graduate school and years in biology. It came from a Hopi elder mentor named Vernon Masayesfa. And he taught me that a water molecule, H2O, does a dance. There's no single molecule. The hydrogen atoms are dancing with the other hydrogen atoms in a beautiful matrix that I find just embedded in much of this work of art. Everything is connected through water. There's an energy of water. So thank you all.
Okay, thank you. We have another question that's coming in that I'm going to say is directed towards Josh Biggs. It says, can you talk a bit more about using drone in private areas and gated communities? Josh, do you want to just talk about your photo process a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like coming from a place, you know, I used to work as a journalist, and I think, you know, as a journalist, you're looking at accessibility all the time. You're trying to figure out how you can access information or visual information to get it out there to people in a way that's going to tell a story, or it's going to change their mind, or that's going to change their impression or something. And I think, you know, there's a key piece here. And, you know, I think that like, it's the idea that, you know, when you're flying, you know, but by the law, you know, there are places, as long as you're flying from a public place and you're flying over a non-regulated airspace, you're allowed to fly. You know, and I think that there's a question, you know, when you talk about sort of kind of private, public sort of interfaces, I think that there's a question that, you know, you can ask yourself, you know, do you want to be flying through a gated community over, you know, someone sunning themselves by their pool or something like that and fly low, or, you know, and to me, that's an open question. But to me, there's also, you know, the question that you want to ask, you know, that, you know, what are you showing and what's the purpose for doing that? And the purpose here, I think, is to show scope. You know, when it's backing up from that one person sunning themselves by their pool in Scottsdale or Fountain Hills, and when you're able to kind of fly up to, you know, hundreds of feet above ground level and see that that's not the only one, you know, that there's a pool next to a pool, next to a pool, next to a pool, next to a fountain. You know, I think that's when you can kind of answer the question of, you know, is it interfacing with this like private area? Is it worth it? Is it ethical? Is it the right thing to do? And, you know, to me, you know, when you back up, you know, and you can show thousands of date trees, you know, or you can show agriculture this way, you know, in a way that, you know, you're backing up from it, and you can see the scope of the water being used. You can see how deep the green is and how far it stretches into the horizon, or see, you know, the cap going from horizon to horizon line. You know, I mean, to me, you know, those are good uses of the tool, basically. And, you know, I think that, you know, showing scope really is, you know, the only way that kind of we can kind of fit this in a frame, really.
Excellent. This next question I'm going to send to you, Clee, and it says, what solutions do you hope your art will bring to problems with future access to water, especially indigenous communities in Arizona?
Well, Yate and Yahet, thank you so much. I want to just give a quick shout out to Julie, to Jane, and to Sarah, and the greater Flagstaff Arts Council and all the artists, and Nick, especially. Somebody in the comment also asked about impressions of the documentary, and really, there's such a good feeling in sort of like comprehensive like grasp of like the content and the work and care that was put into the documentary, so I really appreciated it. Nothing beats sitting in the gallery, but I think it's the closest thing. As far as the question, I think like we're at a critical time. Just back in 2018, we had over 200 wild horses that were found dead in the Cameron area on the reservation, just about 40 minutes north of Flagstaff, due to the drought. And we have ongoing conflicts of water, and this is something that underscores the reality that we face. I think that our role as artists, one is that we are storytellers, but all of us can be part of this story to help bring healing and harmony back into this conflict, because with any conflict there are different sides and there are different perspectives, and it's up to us to participate actively on a political level and a social level to raise awareness regarding these issues, and to participate actively on whatever level we can, engage politically, engage and especially I think another question to address, like questions regarding policy. A lot of the policies regarding water are implicit because a lot of license has been given and a lot of passes have been given freely to unsustainable extractive industries and recreational as well as agricultural practices. So we have to basically put ourselves into the conversation, and if the doors are closed, we have to open them. We have to find a way to put our foot in that door to make sure not only that we have a seat at the table, but our voice is part of that chorus that is helping to define the future for those coming generations, so that we make sure that we have enough water resources for all, that we can ensure health and harmony and balance for Mother Earth, that we're not just working against creation. And I think that this is really key. As I mentioned in my piece, and I think if you read my artist statement, which is on the website, this takes centering the voices and the efforts of indigenous grassroots organizations that have been fighting this fight for a long time. You know, people who are on the front line like Ernest, people like Marie Gladue, and many other organizations that are part of this battle. And I think that that's a key part of it. So thank you for asking that question. I think we need to consistently ask that question in many of these spaces to make sure that this issue is taken as seriously as possible.
Thank you, Clee. That's really well said. I have another question that we're going to send over to Deborah. For Deborah, about your algae, are those actual colors of the algae? We didn't catch all of that part, but they're beautiful. Do you want to talk a little bit more about color?
Thank you. Yeah, and I'd also like to say that, you know, since we're talking about the idea of art and science, that I also had a collaboration because of working with Jane when we, I was late to the project, but when we got the agenda and I saw that we were going to be going to Fossil Creek, I knew what I wanted to do. So Jane and her students helped me collect algae at Fossil Creek. We took them back, and my husband, who has had a algae lab for more than a decade, and this is probably why I had the affinity to work with that. So with his lab, I was able to look at the different types of algae under the microscope, and it's almost like photography, you know, or video, because I'm moving the images of droplets of water with these different algae. So I can say that for the paintings that are predominantly green, this was Chara. So yes, the coloration was very similar to what I was looking at under the microscope. The other pieces, the other algae were in this state of degeneration and regrowth. And so for those paintings that might have had more of a gray or a tan background, that would have actually been part of the water droplets that were forming the coloration. So for the most part, it was what I was seeing, and then in other venues, the coloration was possibly heightened a little, but still in keeping with what was going on under the microscope.
Great. The next question I'm going to ask you, Jane, is there an effort to show the documentary on or with tribal organizations, schools, maybe an exhibit at the Navajo Nation Museum? Do you want to talk a little bit about where we want this documentary to go?
Yeah, so we're really enthusiastic about building partnerships with this documentary and showing it to both to community groups, to Native groups in schools, So just, email me. I'll put my email in the chat. But the National Science Foundation largely funded this, and so we can distribute it for free, and we want to distribute it for free, and we want to set up different viewings. I don't think we're going to be able to get this whole group together again and again, but I think that we could get small groups of the people behind the scenes to participate in different showings of this. So I will put my email, and yes, whoever wants to see this, we will help figure out a way to make it available.
Perfect. This next question, I'm coming back to you, Sean, and it's a good one. When we were open in person, I had a lot of inquiries about this, but the question is, how many cattail heads were needed for the installation? How did Sean come up with such an ethereal material to use? Sean, can you answer that question? You're on mute again, Sean.
Cattail heads, the number was 900,064. No, I have no clue. I tried counting once how many I was going to be collecting, and it lasted less than a minute. It's basically 2 days, 2 8-hour days of collecting. Once, and I do it in mid-November. And the other question, how come? I'm always on this search for natural materials that I can use to create my art. I guess that's pretty much answers it.
Yeah, Sean, I will help you out with that to give a visual to our viewers. When Sean installed, he brought in 2 of the regular size UPS boxes, and they were stacked full of the cattail heads. And I would say over course of 2 days, it probably took 6-7 hours, Sean, would you say?
Yeah,
So
and that's I think five or six of us doing it.
Yeah.
So it took longer to install the piece than to collect the heads, which is pretty amazing because you had 5 or 6 people working each day, and I collected the heads on my own. So
awesome. Okay, this is back to Neil. Someone said, when I saw the sand fountain, I really did taste sand in my mouth. How did you come up with such an amazing, evocative way of expressing and surprise? Neil, do you want to talk about how you came up with the idea?
Yeah, I think it was linked to like some of the earliest brainstorming I did for pieces for this show, like things associated with water and trying to explore the, like the emotional and intellectual connections we have to things, and a fountain is, suggests abundance. It's a decorative, it's a playful thing. And so, I had a vision early on of one flowing with sand. Now the problem was that getting it to work, was a whole nother task. But the idea comes first. That I wanted a fountain to flow with sand. And the thing that and this happens, I think, with a lot of artists is I didn't like some of those things, like tasting the sand or like the sound of it flowing. Like I thought it was going to be a little bit more of a like visually coarse than it was. But like if you look at the video that's in the exhibition that Nick shot beautifully, by the way, thanks for all your help with that. It was really quite beautiful in a way that I didn't expect. And like I said, like the taste of the sand, I thought brought something to it that wasn't part of my original idea behind it, but was such a nice detail that I think deepened the concept and hopefully deepened the audience experience. So I don't know if that answered the question, but.
Yes, thank you, Neil. Okay, we have another question for Delisa and Sean. Folks are wondering how Delisa and Sean's performance idea changed and evolved from the original idea to video as a result of pandemic. Delisa, do you want to talk about that and how you had to adapt since you're a performance artist?
Yeah, I was originally planning to do that performance live, and it became apparent that that wasn't going to happen. And so we started, I guess, in June to create a film instead. And the film is not really the performance; it's its own thing. Amanda Capp did the film and the editing, and yeah, that's. It was supposed to be live, and it became a film, which was really a benefit, because I got to work in a different medium, and I got to shoot in several different sites with Sean, and it just became its own creation. And I think that that's one of the upsides of the pandemic for me, is I got to really work in a new way.
Great. So I'm going to send this one back to the scientists. What is the single most important policy or legislation that could make a difference to move the water issues in a better direction? Jane, I think you want to say something, but you're muted.
I think Roger should take a first shot at this.
Roger, did you hear that question? I know you just stepped out.
I'm here.
Okay.
And here's the question. Policy-wise, I think the pricing of water has to be changed. I mean, that came through in the exhibit. I just loved how we were able to see the differential amount of water that $100 would buy. And oh my God, even though I planted that seed, I had no appreciation of the visual. Secondly, I think the state is already working on a groundwater Rural Groundwater Management Act, and even Kingman, fairly politically conservative area, is seeing that they don't like the fact that some outside company is pumping the heck out of groundwater with no restrictions to grow stuff to export elsewhere. So those are two ideas.
I'll follow up on, it's so hard when you ask somebody what's the single most, because especially with water, because I think the whole point is that it's all integrated, and you can't take it from, that, if one group's using it, another can't use it. Maybe they can after, but they almost always change it. And I think that, pricing certainly popped into my head as a single big problem. I also think, like, regardless of how much it costs, 3 or 4 years ago, the United Nations passed a resolution declaring water as a human right. And so I believe that, everybody in this nation should have easy access to clean water, even if that's expensive. And then the other is water for nature, because I think that, while pricing, I think, is a great idea, the fish and the insects don't have bank accounts, and they can't actually afford to pay for the water that they want. And so I think that those two issues need to be, above and beyond any kind of invisible hand pricing solutions. And I know Roger's not going to disagree with that.
Not, but I want to add one other item, since you're looking at the international perspective. I think the rights of nature indigenous movement around the world that is in Australia or in New Zealand, in parts of the US and other places in South America, beginning to actually give nature the same rights that property owners. We've treated water as property, and that's just tantamount to disaster.
Okay. This next question is for you, Nick. We're questioning the videographer, filmmaker. Nick, the videography is wonderful in the documentary. Can you talk about the process of obtaining this beautiful footage?
Sure. I mean, I think as a filmmaker, I spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to bring depth and context and beauty to my pieces. And I feel like the artists already did all that work for me. My job was mostly just spending a lot of time with the art and pointing the camera in the right direction and exposing properly. I really tried not to focus too much on stuff outside of the exhibit. I wanted to constantly bring it back to the exhibit. But honestly, the pieces are so beautiful that I just really tried to look at it in a unique way. And I thought a lot about someone standing in a gallery and how they might experience a piece in a way to make the video feel different, getting a few different perspectives, different angles that you might not get standing in a gallery, so that the video brings some new perspective to the audience. But yeah, I feel like the artist did most of the work in this case.
It was a joint effort and everyone's done a wonderful job. Glory, we have some folks who want to hear from you and talk, if you could just talk about your beautiful hangings of cloth and just tell more about how you make those pieces.
Okay, the clouds are woven on chicken wire in simple weave technique using paper. Some are handmade paper. Some I made here using desert material, agave, different plants. Also, some paper I made with a paper artist years ago. And one paper was a gift, which I included a gift from the Amati basket weaver in New Zealand. So that's hanging, and it has the word Y, which is water in their native language, and that's hanging. And the cloth are sheer cloth that I had to buy. I wanted to use natural material, but it was hard to find, so I had to go and purchase the fabric. And I made stamps, handmade stamps, letter by letter, for each tribal word, water word, and those are all stamped on. It was a good project. I enjoyed it. But the main idea was that Indigenous people have creation stories that are very valuable to them. And it's like their blueprint for their lives. It's very important. And so the clouds are very important to the Dene people, especially in their ceremonies and the creation of the people. And I think the creation stories are also a guide to how life started, and it's repeating today. A lot of what is happening now happened maybe way, way back into the Ice Age. So they are valuable in that sense. So we need to appreciate it, and maybe it will contribute to what we are fighting now. And the idea of the rights of rivers and mountains and plants that Roger brought up is very important. So all of that is part of, I think the idea came through the art, I hope. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Glory. Clee, we have a question about your process for developing the 3D mapping. Can you just share what that experience is like for people who maybe haven't seen that before?
Yeah, the projection mapping, there is some 3D element, and the idea was to actually play with the dimension in the space of the gallery. But yeah, mainly it was just working with, like on a technical level, working with After Effects and Photoshop, as well as a bit of Final Cut Pro. And then more or less like with the methodology, it was just to play with the space, textures, and just like look at different examples of rugs and find ways that I could create a depth and this sense that something, you were in the space of that as well. So yeah, that was pretty much it. The main thing is like I wanted in the pieces that I made, because in the past I've worked with virtual reality headsets, and they're so like, you know, individual. I wanted to make something that created a sense of motion, and that actually you felt like you were part of a moving story. And I think that that's really important, especially when we were talking about like the policy issues. And I appreciate the comment where somebody's, you know, saying, let's hear from everybody, more voices about policy issues and impacts. Because I take issue with the political strategies of commodifying our natural resources. I think that that's like part of the misstep in our approach, and what, you know, sort of precipitates the imbalances that we have. We need to rethink our approach to water, and I think that that's part of what's, you know, an underlying aspect of the conflict here. What are our values? Like, let's actually, as I mentioned in the documentary, get back to that, you know, initial conversation and talk about consent, talk about, you know, not just the rights of water, but in relation to those who have existed here since time immemorial, the ways that we can be good stewards and make sure that we're not just commodifying and approaching this from a materialistic standpoint. So, yeah.
Great answer. Another question came in, and I'm going to send it to Audrey. It's, my husband teaches middle school science, and he wants to know what the most important thing about water that the students should know. And if you want to share your answer and bounce it to someone else for their opinion.
Sure. What a great question. I think I, as the former teacher and educator, think one of the most important things is thinking of water as finite. And I think Clea was just mentioning this, but it is this thing that we all share and that we need to protect. We need to think about the ways that we use it. We are 70% water ourselves. It is like truly a part of us. And water, that phrase, water is life, is so meaningful in this documentary and in this exhibit. And I think I would challenge, especially middle school students, to think about, what does water mean to them? How does it play a role in their lives? And how, as a finite part of our planet, can we steward water in all of the different ways that you saw examples of through this art? So I'll toss it back to whoever else wants to answer. But yeah, this idea that it's finite and something really worth protecting and being careful with.
You know, I'm curious to hear Jani's perspective, because I know, you know, she teaches at NAU in chemistry. So
thanks, Jane. And, you know, water is, it goes through many cycles. And so it is somewhere at any given point. And so it's a matter of how we use it and how we misuse it. So I think that is very important, but it doesn't go away. It cycles through being a solid in the glaciers, in solution or liquid in our oceans and rivers and streams, and then into the gas phase. But how we utilize it and where it goes is super important. And so I think we have to think about that and really, you know, ponder, is it worth the cost because we make it cheaper for golf courses, but yet it's so expensive for folks who have to haul it and, you know, use it for everyday life. You know, thinking about those types of costs, because it doesn't go away, it cycles through, but where it is at any given point in time is really important.
Could I add? So, can people hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Roger.
Okay. Playing off of Jani's breakdown, I would say that if we look at the elements of life on Earth, they include the sun, the soil, the air, and the water. And water is the key element to those four elements. The sun energizes the water to move up into the air, back into the oceans. The moon creates tides, the gravity of the moon, and it's that rhythm of the earth and the water cycle that generates life. And if every kid in every school could learn this, which is something that every child, I think, of indigenous peoples understand the rhythm and the energy of water, it would create a much different paradigm for sustainability.
Yep. Okay. And a question for our curator, Julie. We have someone who's curious how curating this show dovetails with your own art, or how it affects the trajectory of you as an artist. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure, that's a nice question. Thank you. Being the curator of this project with this group of dynamic artists was just truly an honor. I think I didn't know how much I could learn from not only the scientists and the presenters, but also the other artists. And I think the exhibition really showcases that through the variety of outcomes of the work and all the different ways that the theme was approached and addressed. In terms of my own art making, it was really good for me to step outside of my art practice and observe the practices of these artists. I'm hoping it'll push me to do more important topical work, and also to seek out collaborations. Yeah, it was just a really fortunate experience, so thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we are getting quite close to the 7 o'clock hour. So I'm going to combine a couple questions and just do a quick little round robin with all of our people who are on the call right now. We've got quite a few folks who are asking what's next. Are folks going to continue to pursue this topic? Kind of like what Julie just talked about, how it's going to affect your work moving forward. So I'll start with Deborah, if you just want to quickly answer that. Oh, and we're also getting a lot of questions about your reaction to the documentary. So if you could wrap that in one sentence, that would be great.
Well, I'll start by talking about the trajectory of this project. This is actually the third project that I've worked on related to water. I did a collaborative called Echoes and Undercurrents. And so when I worked with water the first time, I was talking about the power and destructive nature of water and how man tries to contain it but can't. And then I was part of the Hope and Trauma exhibition. And my project had to do with the idea of consumption and how much we waste water. So when I got to this project, I wanted to talk about something that was more hopeful. And I like the idea of, the restoration of Fossil Creek, and the idea not just of human consumption, but how water can be used and life in and through water. So, I noticed that somebody was talking about the idea of the connection between art and science. And that was another thing that I really wanted to work with, because I think that oftentimes people think that art is, decorative and maybe not something that is as important. And that's why STEAM is always, they always talk about STEAM or STEM versus STEAM. And I wanted to work on something that really attached me to the ecosystem, and working with the idea of the food web, that everything building all the way up leads us back to ourselves. But if we don't start thinking about that base level, which is what the algae is, because really there's so many important things about algae. So this is not the end of my my exploration into water or into algae, just because as we're talking about, the decrease of water and climate change, that, you know, that we need to be thinking about that ecosystem and what it can do. And algae does so many things. You know, it has so much high protein, takes nitrogen and ammonia, carbon dioxide out of the air. It can be used as biofuel. So, you know, there's so many different ways that I can utilize this project, and I will probably be continuing on that level of algae and microorganisms.
Exciting. Clea, do you want to share what you've got going on?
Yeah, I guess the way I'd approach it is just saying that, like, so for Diné folks, and I think most Indigenous people, there's no dichotomy between art and culture and who we are. And I think that as storytellers, for me, my stories I like to tell in the streets sometimes. And so I think like the arts and sciences heavily, I guess, emphasized here, but I think art, science, and action is another component. And so I'd like to be in the streets with some of y'all who are listening to this, or be at some of the meetings, you know, at these places where decision makers are making these policy changes, or making sure that we're just actively engaged. And so sometimes I make art that's on banners at protests, and sometimes, and I think especially with this exhibit, it was really inspiring to dig a little deeper into these more rudimentary forms of motion. And I think I'm excited about continuing that. So there's a lot of stories to be told. And unfortunately, especially in the time of COVID-19, when we're looking at water scarcity issues on top of like this critical pandemic, we need to make sure that we're out there that much more in very safe and, you know, very, I guess, critical ways for our community. So I just want to thank all of the artists again, and really appreciate everything that y'all do.
Thank you.
And scientists, sorry, and organizers and filmmakers.
Gianni, do you want to give a quick little soundbite on what you've got going on? And I know you're not new to the art and science collaborations, but if you plan to do more in the future.
Yeah, I think dissemination, I think, is super important. We keep trying to get our scientific results out, and I think we lose sight of that arts is the best actual way to get information to the communities. So I think that's really important, and I want to move forward with that. And then I think, jumping off of what Clea said, the water infrastructure issues, at least on Navajo and other tribal nations, and COVID issues are really interrelated. And so continuing to try and get better water to those communities is really important. So that's what we're working on.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Neil, anything exciting to share?
Yeah, only to say that I was so excited to be invited to be part of this Parched exhibition, because it felt like such a natural extension of the kind of work that I do anyway, which is sculptural installation, usually informed by, you know, scientific inquiry on environmental issues. And so, you know, you can't talk about all of them at once. So you have to, you know, laser focus. And this Parched exhibition gave me an opportunity to do that on water. And yeah, I would say, to answer the question just a tiny bit more specifically, and I mentioned this earlier, but kind of crafting the floodlines piece to just like represent the data on the communities where the exhibition is moving, like that's kind of where my mind is going with this work. And yeah, that's the thing that has attracted me to art for the longest time, is that like science is really compelling, and it's compelling to the people who are interested in it. But, you know, like in the example of climate change, like we've known that climate change is a problem and that humans need to change our actions since like the 1970s. And the evidence has gotten only stronger while we've simultaneously, you know, taken, you know, increasingly destructive action. So, you know, it's not that stronger, you know, scientific consensus needs to be built, it's that minds and hearts need to change. And I think that's where art can play a really powerful role.
Thank you, Neil. Jane, do you want to share?
Sure, thank you. That's a great question. So I feel that the Arts Council has really hit on a winning combination here of having this boot camp experience. And I think we need to rename it, because boot camp doesn't seem that fun. But to really give a group of artists a common experience and knowledge base, and to see what comes out of that. And so, you know, where I'm looking to is to expand this to more community art groups so that, like, you know, maybe we had a month in Flagstaff where the symphony and the performing arts and all the different types of arts were focusing on a big issue like climate change or biodiversity conservation. And so to, you know, I'm tired today, but tomorrow when I wake up, I'm looking to kind of expand the whole general idea of it.
Perfect. Sean Scavland?
Yeah, it's nice to be an artist and not a curator for once. First, Nick, that was gorgeous. I was very impressed, and it's hard to impress me. So you're going to win the Viola for storytelling, I can tell you already. And several other awards. I'm excited for just specifically just to this project because since I do place-based work, I'm not doing the same piece down in Amarand. I'm doing a whole new installation, and that's going to be exploring San Pedro River, which used to be called the Beaver River because there were so many beavers in it. And so that's basically, I won't get into that anymore, but that's the roots of that installation, is learning about. I've been down there several times, taking students down to the border for migration issues. So I'm excited to go down and explore the issues down there, or that issue down there with the San Pedro River and other areas. So.
Thank you, Sean. And for anyone who missed it, Sean is referencing the fact that the exhibition will travel to the Amarand Museum, opening in February 2021. Glory, if you want to quickly, we're wrapping up on time, but share where you're going to take this topic next, or your artwork. You're on mute, Glory.
Okay. I've been quilting, so I will probably continue doing that. It's a work in progress. And I think I will continue making paper from natural material that I find outside. And commercial paper that artists buy, and any kind of paper uses a lot of water, tons of water. So I would like to experiment with using very little water to make paper.
Great.
Thank you.
Nick, Guy, do you plan to do more art documentaries?
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, arts and sciences, if this is all I could shoot the rest of my life, I would be happy.
You can hire Nick, folks. Firewatch Media. Kathleen, did you want to share your work?
Yeah, I'm not really sure what's happening next. I've thought a lot about the process that I've been using to do these underwater photograms. I've been using that for maybe 8 years now in different rivers and bodies of water. It uses a photographic paper that's becoming obsolete, and it has to be processed in really toxic chemicals. So I don't want to do that anymore because I feel like I'm creating more of an environmental problem with that. So I'm probably not going to be working with the same process, but I'll be exploring other ways to keep working on environmental issues. And thank you so much. Nick, the video is amazing, and thank you, Julie and Jane and Sarah. Thank you so much, everybody, because it's pretty terrific.
Thank you, Kathleen. Elisa?
Yeah, something that's so interesting to me is this idea of water having rights and, say, a river having rights. And I feel like there's huge potential for the arts and science and whoever is making the legislation to really be looking at it in that way. And that's just an area that is fascinating for me right now, is what can we do as artists that can get on board with helping water have rights? Because it has, you know, it has to at some point come to the place where, you know, we need to protect it. And obviously money is not going to protect it. You know, we have to protect it with our hearts and with the right, you know, we have to protect it with that it is a life-giving force and it needs to be protected. So I hope that we can move in that direction.
Good point, Delisa. Roger, if you want to share, do you anticipate Grand Canyon Trust collaborating again in the future, or any projects you guys are working on?
Well, I just think that the politics of equity are ripe for this film to be shown, the documentary, and individual artists to give testimony to groups like the Central Arizona Water Conservation District, which manages the Central Arizona Project, get this in the hands of the Salt River Project shareholders and board. There's great potential here of showing this and finding a way to convince the beneficiaries of this system that's taken so much from the land to reinvest in clean water, potable water for the communities that have been left behind. So I think it's a political moment.
Yeah, very good. Audrey, did you want to share?
Okay, I'm enjoying listening.
Okay. Ernest?
Yeah, I'd like to thank everybody that participated in this project. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. It's been a blessing. I really enjoyed working with you, Kathleen. Again, Clee, thanks for the invitation. None of this would happen for me if that wasn't offered. Nick, the film is excellent. I loved it. Very well done. But thank you very much for allowing me to be a part of this. Thanks.
Thanks, Ernest. Josh, do you want to share? Josh?
I'm sorry, Sarah. What did you say, Josh?
Yeah, Josh.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. So hey, first of all, I wanted to thank Julie for inviting me to work on this project, and everybody who we collaborated, and all the, you know, there's so much input and so much to learn, you know, during our boot camp. And I think that, again, I want to echo, you know, you synthesize this in a way that, you know, there are a lot of moving pieces, and I really didn't even see all of them until I really came into contact with the documentary part of this. So I'm really glad that that came into play here. As for me, you know, I still have some places pinned on maps across the state that I want to try to go fly over that look odd, you know, green slashes of things in the desert. And, you know, there's a, you know, you would never guess it, but there's something that I'm hoping to chase around, do a little bit of chasing this winter. There's these water ski communities that have popped out, like out in the middle of nowhere in the desert, you know, and they look very, very strange from the sky. And I'm really curious about them, but we'll see on that. Yeah, thank you again, everybody, for having me aboard. And, you know, it's been such a great process to be a part of this.
Perfect. Julie, did you want to add?
I'll only add that Sarah, as the representative here from the Flagstaff Arts Council, I hope you keep on the organization to keep on doing important work. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. To kind of piggyback on that, just let everyone know these signature exhibitions are very much a priority for our programming. And we certainly hope to continue to do them. We're also not ending Parched just when the show closes. It's scheduled to go through January 9th of 2021. We're still unclear if we're going to be able to allow any more in-person viewing, but we have created a virtual platform where you can read all of the artists' statements, view all the there are images there, and read all the educational content. So I'm going to drop that link in the chat right now. But yeah, other than that, I just want to thank everyone for participating. Thank you to the sponsors, the Parched Steering Committee, all the artists, all the scientists. It's obviously a huge collaboration. So thank you for taking the time. And we're also getting a lot of questions. We will share a link that doesn't have the slideshow in the beginning starting tomorrow. So the documentary will be free access, and we plan to share it out as much as we can. And so stay tuned for that new link. So with that, I will say good night. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, everybody. It's been an honor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie and Sarah, everybody, Audrey.
Oops. Yes, it's calling me. Hello.
Thanks all.
Okay.